guys, Professor Yerby here again. In this video we're going to be using a document from the International Competition Network to talk about digital evidence, gathering, preservation, go over a couple of terms related to gathering digital evidence, and then we'll talk about compelled discovery. So let me go ahead and say we're going to get started, and what I'm going to use for this tutorial is, again, this document from the International Competition Network. So this is an anti-cartel enforcement manual. So this manual is focused on anti-cartel behavior, but what we're going to use it for is looking at digital evidence gathering and then compelled discovery. So when I say cartel, you're probably thinking of Gus Fring or thinking of La M or the Mexican Mafia or something. But the cartel that we're talking about, it's not what you're probably thinking of. Again, this is from the International Competition Network. So let's take a quick look at their definition of what a cartel is, and just to give you a little bit of a frame of reference. So cartel working group is to address the challenges of anti-cartel enforcement, and a cartel is really just an arrangement or an agreement between things, between companies or between people. Different agencies have agreements with other agencies to share information, share secrets, and so sometimes those groups may not want to give information about the other one. But if you'd like to read more here, I'll provide the link in the description of the video, and if you're viewing this video as part of my class, then I'll provide this entire 37-page document in the learning management system. So again, I'm not going to go through all 37 pages, but what I'm going to really concentrate on are looking at several different terms. I'll brush across the importance of digital evidence, and then we'll look a little bit about searches and raids, and we'll end with compelled discovery. So let's go ahead and get started. As I'm scrolling through here. So this is the introduction, and just talking about, it gives some more information about the International Competition Network, that they're here to overview of practices and procedures for digital evidence gathering. So again, just one more time, this is focused on anti-cartel type behavior, but these practices can be used for most any type of forensics investigation. So let's get down to the terms. So our first term, we've seen this one before, computer forensics. So this is using specialized techniques for preservation, identification, extraction, authentication, examination, analysis, interpretation, and documentation of digital information. So each of those steps are very important, and what we'll be kind of focusing on here are the preservation, a little bit of the identification, and the extraction of evidence. So we've already, in previous learning modules, we've talked about the authentication, examination, analysis, and we've kind of talked about interpretation and documentation. We'll constantly talk about that here and there, because that's an extremely important step of doing the forensics investigation to begin with. But it comes into play when case involves issues relating to reconstruction of computer system usage, examination of residual data, authentication of data by technical analysis or explanation of techniques, using different forensics tools and forensics techniques, things that can be proven, can be supported, can be replicated. So next thing we'll look at is the term digital information. So that's just any information that is in digital form, and digital form could be something that was in digital form. So I thought I had a document here next to me that I was going to use it as an example, but it's not. But so it could be a hard copy of a document that could also kind of come into play digital form because it was created using a computer. So that, I mean, that term gets a little loose, a little sticky. But digital evidence. So this is all digital information that may be used as evidence in a case. The gathering of digital information may be carried out by confiscation of storage media, the taping or monitoring of network traffic, or the making of digital copies. So this would include our forensics images, those bit by bit, those streams, those live captures, all those things. File copies of data held, although hard copy. Okay, so this kind of goes through what I was just mentioning. Although hard copy printouts of digital information are not digital evidence in the strict sense of this definition, it is considered a starting point for applying digital evidence gathering in the future. So that document that I was just speaking about, that I thought this was, but it's not. But that document, it's not digital evidence because it's not. This is not in a digital form. Say this was printed with something. It's not digital information, or it's not digital evidence, but it could still be considered digital information because it was created using resources, and it could lead you to a place to start looking. So if you're doing an investigation, say you're actually going on site for something and you see something out in the open, that can be part of search and seizure depending on what type of agency you're working on. So here's a term for just forensics in general: chain of custody and chain of evidence. We've seen these before. These are extremely important, so especially if you're going to be pursuing any kind of action, through the law, where you need to prove something, where you need to preserve the integrity of the investigation to make sure that evidence wasn't tampered with. So you need to make sure that all of the chain of custodies, that you're following your secure forensics investigation location, that you have the proper locks, sign in, sign outs, that only authorized personnel are able to access the data. Hopefully you've taken that original image and you created a forensic copy, and then you tagged and bagged it, stored it, preserved it, haven't touched it, haven't tampered with it, hasn't been moved around by some moving guy and sat in some warehouse over here where people were walking in and out. So those things can be really important, and it can really poke some holes in your investigation really quickly if you don't follow the chain of custody and chain of evidence to show where this thing's been, who's had access to it, who didn't have access to it, what's been done to whatever. Data carrier is any device that contains or transports digital information, including physical hard drives, floppy disk, PDAs, like those exist anymore, USBs, SIM cards from a cell phone, flash memory stick, network and server, and this is non-exhaustive, so there's more and more. Hash value. So we've looked at this in previous modules, so I think this is actually probably a better definition than what I may have given you before. So a hash value is a mathematical algorithm produced against digital information, so it could be a file, a physical disk, a logical disk, an image capture, thereby creating a digital fingerprint for that information. So I really like that definition better than what I have previously given you. So you're taking X and you're making a copy of it over here. They look the same to the eye, right? I think that I've gotten everything over here because I told my software to grab it, right? Or I did a data dump and it should just grab everything, shouldn't change anything. But what you have to do is just do a hash value, and then what it does is it runs this mathematical formula, creates that key, that fingerprint. You just make sure that this one matches this one. If they match, you can be, I'm sorry, I'm shaking the monitor here, getting excited. But you can be, relatively sure that these things are identical, that you haven't missed something, you haven't tampered with something, you haven't changed something. So I really like that definition, a digital fingerprint. Forensics image, again, we've gone through that. It's a bit-by-bit copy of a data carrier, including SLAC. So we may not have covered SLAC space yet. We'll cover that in another learning module. But basically what it is, so you're familiar with a file allocation table. You have a circle. I wish I had maybe I'll put a graphic up here to go along with this when I'm doing some editing. But you have a file allocation table, and then so each sector contains a certain size, but there are some sectors that don't get completely used because that piece of the file it doesn't need all that space. So what you have is you have this thing called slack space. So there could be hidden data in that slack space, and there's software to hide stuff in that slack space because a normal cursory view of that hard drive is not going to look at slack space, but there are tools to go through and look at that. So again, hopefully I'll have some kind of image or graphic to kind of help you visualize slack, but if not, don't worry, we'll cover this in some future learning modules. Live forensics is seizing or analyzing system information, memory contents, and data carriers from live systems. So that's systems that are up and running. So that could be done on site, or it could be done through what we've called remote acquisitions. So extracts information from live memory. This is good for getting information out of RAM, because once you turn the computer off, anything that's in RAM is gone, because RAM is a volatile medium. So it goes off, it's empty. Cloud computing just goes through. That's somewhat relevant here. Let's see, continuing on. So part 3, again, I'm not going to go over this terribly much. It's just the importance of digital evidence gathering, and it gives some advantages of digital evidence gathering that more and more business processes are becoming digitized. And even if you're doing like a criminal investigation, more and more of criminal activity is becoming digital. And if you're working in a civil case, more of these, when I think civil cases, a lot of times I think you're doing some spying for one spouse on the other, but it could be trying to get custody of your children, or I don't know, something like this. But more and more of all of these activities are becoming digitized with expanding social media, consumerization of information technology, more people having smartphones. So, and let's see. So, some information has not nor ever will exist on paper. So, developments in technology influence the ways in which companies create and store digital information. Companies rely on lesser extent on hard copy documents. That couldn't be more true nowadays. I mean, you'll still see plenty of paper in most offices, but think of that job, or think of that process 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30, 40 years ago. I mean, there's so much that's done on the computer that never has to be printed, and you would never want printed because of the sensitive information on the document, or you just don't want to waste the paper. So there's lots of people out there that make their living on trying to make a paper-free workplace. I haven't seen one yet. I've seen plenty of the people that claim that they're going to make the paper-free workplace. It's hard to get completely paper-free, but boy, have companies really moved in that direction. Let's see. So maybe some hard copy information was destroyed, so maybe intentionally or unintentionally, maybe it was misplaced, misfiled, but if you can find that information in a digital form, especially if you're looking at, this is our anti-cartel paper that we're using here, but if you're looking at information that's stored in maybe a huge company database, you can really find a lot of information that's probably already organized in a pretty easily usable format. Let's see. So it's talking about hard copy limited to the content there. What this is referring to is our metadata. So this is the data about the data. So you can see, that last time it was modified, accessed, or created, those kinds of things. Let's see. We'll skip over this legal authority for this video, and then we'll end on section 5, distinctions and digital evidence gathering. So there are two main practices used by agencies to gather digital evidence. So the first one, searches, raids, and inspections. So if you're in a forensics team, that can be pretty important to you. and on the other one is Compelled Discovery. And so even if you're not planning on going into the field of digital forensics, which I imagine that many of you in my class are not going to go into that field, but you probably are going to go into the field of networking or information assurance in some roles, a network admin, a director, a CISO, CIO, some of these jobs, and this will become very important to you when you get that letter from an attorney. So let's go through searches, raids, and inspections, and then we'll end on the compelled discovery. So search or raid inspections, you probably already know what those are. And so this document says digital evidence gathering by means of a search, a raid, or inspection can be carried out in different ways. Some agencies are allowed to seize digital information. Others can copy or make forensics images of information. And so if you're working in law enforcement, you have a search warrant and you have an affidavit that allows you to seize information, you can just go ahead and seize the information. You'll want to, rope off the crime scene, take photographs, make sure that you can, recreate the crime scene if needed, show where things were plugged in, make sure you seize any related information, so even CDs laying around, USBs laying around. You'll probably see a lot of Mountain Dew cans if you're going into I won't go there because some of you may drink Mountain Dew, but talk to some law enforcement agencies about digital forensics crime scenes and the prevalence of Mountain Dew. So one type of I'll stop. Okay. But anyways, so others can make forensic images of digital information, and most cases information is collected on site and then it's analyzed later. So again, this is coming at it from our Cartel, looking at breaking up competition or agreements, partnerships. This generally takes place at the offices of the agency. And so it goes through some of the ways that they may retain that information or collect the information. So this is really what we want to focus on here. And then the last thing that I wanted to spend a moment on is compelled discovery. So compelled discovery, whether by the subpoena, order for production, or request for information, is used to compel companies or individuals to produce any requested documents or records, whether paper or digital, that are relevant to the investigation. So let's keep reading on, and we'll kind of talk about what that means. An agency may compel a company or an individual to preserve all potentially responsive digital evidence. So this becomes a real problem when you get a letter from an attorney or from some other agency or from law enforcement that tells you that you need to preserve all potentially responsive digital evidence. So you have to preserve and prove that you've preserved all evidence that could be related to the case. So if you're not thinking of having some kind of measures in place beforehand, this could be a real challenge for you. Think if you got a letter today that is for an individual case, and someone says that they think that someone's been on your network and they viewed some child pornography, and that you need to show all potentially related evidence. Well, what's the evidence? I mean, in your case, you think that nothing's happened and there shouldn't be any evidence, there shouldn't be anything. So you can produce log files, you can look at who's been on your network, maybe MAC addresses, but what other things are they looking for? So in this case, the company or individual, not the agency, that performs a thorough search of all responsive evidence and produces the evidence in an acceptable format. And we'll look at some of those formats. It's important to learn about the computer systems and the efforts made by the company to preserve digital information. So this is where I said you have to kind of have this, just in case. I mean, you could be working for a bank or a restaurant or I'm just trying to think, a school agency. Where else do people work? People work other places. Car dealership, whatever it is. And there's something that's gone bad. So you have to gather all emails that have been sent and received in the last 2 years, because some deal went bad with this car sale, or some deal went bad with this big property contract. Search methodology used by the company is also an important issue. So you have to not only go back and preserve everything that could be related, and you got to say how you did it and why this is, you're actually preserving everything. Always go through your legal counsel, your company's legal counsel. Make sure that you don't put yourself personally in any risky situations that you shouldn't put yourself into. Before you respond to these, use your legal counsel. But you do have to respond to them. But always use legal counsel, when dealing with these things, because some of these issues can become tricky, especially depending on who you're dealing with. Several agencies reported the use or ability to use compelled discovery for digital evidence gathering in addition to searches, raids, or inspections. A number of agencies make written requests called statutory notices for digital evidence. One agency reported to have broad authority to conduct criminal investigations, including issuing document subpoenas to companies and individuals suspected of engaging in anti-competitive activity. These subpoenas can compel companies to produce to the government any requested documents, whether paper or digital, that are relevant to the grand jury investigation. The agency collects digital evidence primarily through the use of document subpoenas. Another agency reported collecting digital evidence by means of court order. One has reported that have powers to obtain information, documents, and evidence relating to matter that constitutes or may constitute a contravention of competition law. One agency stated it can issue or obtain in any form copies or excerpts of documents, account books, financial, accounting, commercial documents, or other evidence related to business and the company associated with companies. So what's really important, what I really want you to take away from this is, again, even if you're not planning to go into the field of digital forensics, this could still be something that you're faced with at some time in your career, when you're on either side of it. So for some reason there's an investigation going on and they need to recreate the timeline of events or whatever those events were, and you as the person that manages the technology, you have to come in and show that you're able to methodically reproduce this timeline, to show this string of emails, this contracts, who said this and then who replied this. So if you're not prepared for this, again, this can be a real nightmare. But just to kind of have to know this and prepare for it when you're making all of your plans, making your acceptable use policies, this kind of stuff can really help you not be blindsided when you're compelled to turn over evidence. So I think that's all that I want to go over today. And so thanks, and I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. So thanks, and I compel you to stop watching now.